You can't escape it. Every single empire in history has fallen, and every single empire that has ever existed has done so because its people grew weak. They lost their identity, values, morals, will, and desire to exist. They failed to adapt and change while the world around them was changing. And most importantly, they lost their sense of purpose. When we look at empires throughout history, whether it be the Roman Empire, the Han Dynasty, the Dutch Empire, or even America's empire across the globe, all of them have fallen due to the exact same reasons. So if you are an ambitious leader who wants to create something special, wants to build something that lasts longer than your own life, then these are lessons you need to know if you do not want to end up like the hundreds of millions of ambitious leaders before you who tried and failed. I'm not sure if you have seen this documentary, but there is one moment that really has stuck with me since watching it. It is the moment where they enter the great library of Alexandria, but instead of finding books upon books of ancient knowledge and wisdom, they find complete darkness. This is the largest collection of books that humanity has ever assembled in one place, and yet there is nothing there. Now I won't lie, it made me question what the documentary maker was playing at. Why would they show us something that isn't there? But then they explained that it is believed that the library was destroyed by a series of fires that were started by Julius Caesar, followed by a fire, started by someone else, followed by an earthquake, which then led to more fires. Eventually, the whole library was burnt down, and with it, tens of thousands of irreplaceable books were lost forever. This is a true story. This is real history. And the lesson that you need to take away from it is that no matter how big, strong, or smart you think your empire is, no matter how unbeatable you think you are, you only have to get a few things wrong over a long enough period of time and eventually even the greatest of empires will fall. Look at Rome, for example. They created the Pax Romana, which is still to this day the longest period of peace and stability that Europe has ever known. But after just 200 years, Rome was burning to the ground, sacked by armies from all around. Look at the Han Dynasty. For over 400 years, they had been the most powerful force in the known world, until suddenly they weren't. Or look at the Dutch Empire. Despite having the strongest navy in the world, despite conquering and controlling half the world, they lost everything within just a few decades. Even America was once the global superpower, but now we are simply laughed at across the planet. Let me ask you this. Why do you think this happens? Why do you think every single empire in history fails? What is the secret source that causes even the strongest empires to fall apart? Let me tell you, it is much simpler than you might think. There is always a reason why nations go to war. There is always a reason why kings betray each other. There is always a reason why people join secret societies. There is always a reason why politicians lie. There is always a reason why companies cheat. There is always a reason behind human actions. People never just do things for no reason. There is always a reason. And if you are able to figure out what that reason is, then you can avoid making the mistakes that bring about your downfall. Once you understand what makes people tick, you can predict their behavior. You can anticipate their decisions, and you can mold the world around you to serve your purposes. But here is where things get very interesting. There is another reason why all empires fail, because no matter how hard you try, you cannot control everything. There is always something that you don't know. There is always some factor that is beyond your control. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try, there is simply nothing you can do about it. For example, when Rome was sacked, it wasn't because the Romans didn't know that sacks were happening. They knew. They saw the armies massing across their borders, but there was nothing they could do about it. When the Han Dynasty fell, it wasn't because they didn't see the problems brewing within their empire. They did, but they couldn't do anything about it. When the Dutch Empire collapsed, it wasn't because they didn't know what was happening. They did, but there was nothing they could do about it. The biggest mistake that every great empire makes is thinking that they can control everything. Oh, if only we could have controlled that one thing, if only that one event had gone differently, then everything would be fine. But that is a lie. Every single empire in history has failed for exactly the same reason. And that reason is that their people became weak. That is it. That is the ultimate reason why every single empire has fallen. Their people became weak. They lost their sense of self. They lost their beliefs, their culture, and their morals. They stopped fighting for something bigger than themselves, and they failed to evolve with the times. Here is the harsh reality that you need to wake up to. Your strength does not come from the size of your army, the amount of land you control, or the money in your bank account. Your strength comes from your people. If your people are strong, then you are strong. But if your people are weak, then you are weak. Look at Rome again. One of the main reasons that Rome fell was because the Germanic tribes kept launching attacks into Roman territory. However, the real reason that Rome fell was not because of the Germanic tribes, but rather because Romans stopped being Romans. As centuries passed, Romans became softer, weaker, and less willing to fight. In fact, you could argue that the Germanic tribes were actually good for Rome because they forced the Romans to fight and therefore stay strong. But with every new generation, the Romans became weaker. In the final days of Rome, men would rather watch chariot races and gladiator fights than do any sort of training. In fact, it was said that by the time Rome was sacked, they didn't even have an army anymore. Do you want to know the biggest secret about empires? Building an empire is easy. Keeping an empire is hard, and keeping an empire for many generations is near impossible. The reason is simple, because every single generation drifts further and further away from the original vision. Think about it. When Alexander the Great died, his empire lasted for just a few short years. Then it was divided among his brothers and sisters. But it wasn't because of outside forces. It was because Alexander's bloodline wanted more power. When Genghis Khan died, his empire also fell apart. But it wasn't because of the enemies he had made along the way. It was because his own grandsons couldn't hold an empire together. The same thing happened with the Ottoman Empire, the Mongol Empire, the Chinese Empire, and the list goes on and on and on. Why? Because people change. Each new generation is different. They have different problems, different opportunities, different ideas, different ways of doing things. So each new generation does things differently. And over time, it becomes harder and harder to recognize the empire that you used to know. So if you are an ambitious leader, if you are someone who wants to make a difference in the world, then the question that you need to be asking yourself is, what can I do today to ensure that my empire survives for generations to come? What can I do today to ensure that my empire does not fall apart the second that I die? If you want your empire to last for generations, you need to ensure that your people remain strong, that they continue to believe in your vision, that they continue to move forward towards your goals. If you want your empire to last, you must breed more ambitious leaders. You must raise an army of individuals who will sacrifice everything for the empire. Otherwise, it won't matter how strong you are, how smart you are, or how much money you have. Without loyal, hardworking, and ambitious people, you will fail. Everyone before you has failed for this exact same reason. Don't let this be the reason that you fail. Rome fell because they stopped producing Romans. The Dutch Empire fell because they stopped producing Dutchmen. The Han Dynasty fell because they stopped producing Chinese. This is the lesson that you need to learn. Do you agree with these points? Which empires do you think will fall in our lifetime? Comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.